right, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the June 19th, Juneteenth edition of Music Cities Together Live. Music Cities Together Live is a presentation of Music Cities Together, which again is a partnership between the Music Policy Forum and Sound Music Cities. As always, we are extraordinarily appreciative that you're spending some of your Friday with us. Today, we are especially appreciative. This is a very important day of reflection and of action, and the fact that you're spending time with us today is particularly meaningful. So happy Juneteenth to everybody. We have a packed program, and we're excited by that. We're really going to be drilling down today, focusing on what's happening with the live music economy, trying to get that restarted as safely and as quickly as possible. Some of the broader sort of dynamics implicit in getting live music up and going again. We're going to be hearing international perspectives, local perspectives, and we're going to drill down specifically to what's happening at a particular venue in Colorado that actually had an event this past weekend. So we'll also be able to talk to performers and venue staff about their experience trying to put on a show in this environment. As always, you can hit us with comments and questions in the Q&A window on Zoom. Our producer, Alex Dolvin, again, thanks to Alex, as always, will be posting some links and other resources in the chat. And then this program, as always, will be put into our YouTube archive over the weekend. So if you felt like this program was useful or interesting and you want to share it with friends and colleagues, please feel free to send the links after they get posted this weekend. So we always begin with a little bit of big picture context, and something that we want to call out quickly is we've talked previously about our admiration and appreciation for the work of the National Independent Venue Association. They have really done tremendous work over the last couple months trying to be a voice for independent music venues. This week, they released another letter, this from over 600 recording artists and performers. That is sort of a sign-on letter to Congress reinforcing the importance of congressional support for independent venues. I think Alex will try to put that in the chat if you haven't seen it. They also have a very, very effective and a very strong grassroots campaign. So if you have not had an opportunity to take action on behalf of the Save Our Stages work and the direct action that NIVA is taking, we certainly encourage you to do so. We look forward to having further conversations around policy strategy and what's happening in Capitol Hill with NIVA in the next couple of weeks. One thing I do want to really emphasize is that music ecosystem work, as all of you know, is extraordinarily complicated, and very rarely is there sort of a binary moment with music ecosystems or with music policy where either one thing will happen or another thing will happen. And in the next couple of weeks, it is anticipated that the Senate is going to take up the House of Representatives legislation related to further economic stimulus. That may well, it's greatly anticipated, lead to a new stimulus bill coming out of Washington, D.C. And when you think about a binary dynamic, there's one world in which NIVA and all of their allies have been successful in getting money allocated specifically to support the local live music infrastructure and ecosystem. And then there's a world where that doesn't happen. And those are two entirely different worlds. And right now, of course, it's very difficult to handicap or understand exactly what that's going to look like as they go through the process. But we really need to fight as hard as we can to make sure that this ecosystem is protected and supported. So again, please take a look at those resources if you haven't had a chance to. Please support the NIVA efforts and spread the word. Again, support money and resources for local music ecosystem is absolutely critical at this moment. So again, thanks to NIVA, and we look forward to further conversations with them. Moving into today's program, most of you who are watching this program have seen this before, been with us before. Some of you are new. We're going to be talking a lot about the REVS initiative, which is the Reopen Every Venue Safely initiative that is a project of Music Cities Together. And very briefly, the point of REVS is not to say that we have a particular date in terms of when we are going to when we want music to open, or what that kind of timeline should look like. What we want to have happen is that when live entertainment, when music is permitted to reopen, we want to make sure that is happening in a coordinated and in a collaborative way where the public health community and the public sector and venues and music workers and musicians are fully integrated in terms of what the experience is going to be like and what the realities and protocols are going to be, and then make sure that whatever is happening with live music is effectively communicated, to audiences and to other elements of the community, so there's transparency and accountability about what this looks like. So again, in the United States, we have started this program through 11 pilot cities that are all working locally and as a national cohort to develop REVS plans that we are going to be making public, hopefully in the next 6 weeks. And we'll be talking to one of our pilots today from the city of Cleveland. We also have international projects and international work that is happening both in Canada and the UK. And we're going to start today by bringing in our friend and other things, Mark Davyd from Music Venue Trust, who is helping lead the REVS initiative in the UK and can share with us some updates about what's happening on that side of the pond and other initiatives that he's been involved with. So Mark, can you say hi? Are you there?
Yeah, I'm interested in the other things, Michael.
Yeah, right?
Other things. That sounds worrying.
Yeah, right. So let's start with some other things. Now, so you've been working on getting this stuff up and going. What are the headlines that we need to know in the States? Again, with the understanding that I'm sure you have been following that the health situation in the States has gotten extraordinarily complicated over the last couple of weeks, and is going to be exacerbated by having 19,000 people in a basketball arena in Tulsa, Oklahoma tomorrow night. But anyway, what is happening? What are the key takeaways kind of with your constituency, and what do we need to know?
Well, we use the REVS process, as you know, Michael, to engage with government. We laid out a series of protocols for engagement, and we gave them a roadmap of what that engagement would look like. That led to the creation of our original REVS protocols and guidance, where we laid out 5 scenarios for government under which music venues may be able to open, and they were related to the prevalence of the disease and to the conditions that might be expected to manage that disease. And basically they ran from protocol A, which essentially said that there would be a vaccine, these kind of things. And effectively music venues would be able to come back pretty much as normal. And then all the way through to protocol E at the other end, where the virus was pretty much unmanageable. And effectively music venues would have to remain closed. And we did that so that we could, as you say, really carefully engage with the best public health advice there was, but also from our point of view so that we could always map out the economic impact of whatever stage of the protocol that we were at. What would be the requirements that would be coming towards venues in order to make those public health restrictions and limitations work within the venue, but then also for government, what was the cost of venues being closed? That process has been ongoing really ever since you first mentioned REVS to me, which is quite a fortunate conversation. And because of that, we have been able to be quite far ahead of the curve on every stage of development of practice and development of opportunities to open. That's the process. What that actually looks like on the ground is not as effective as you might hope it would be. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is that we are very much dealing with outside influences, not dealing with the kind of pure best public health guidelines and best government practice that we might want. The best way I can explain that is each sector of industry and of retail and of commerce and hospitality has its own working group within government to design the standards by which it may be able to open, the guidance. And some of those sectors are plainly, frankly, more interested in being open than they are in the best public health practice. Mm. So particularly, I would pick out the pubs, bars and restaurants, which is effectively controlled by some very strong chain voices who have really fought, frankly, to get the lowest amount of guidance necessary for them to comply with. Realistically, our venues, which are more community-based and feel more responsibility to a client base with whom they have a strong, ongoing, and sometimes lifelong relationship, are not of a similar mind. And so the pubs, bars, and restaurants guidance was actually finished very, very quickly, and essentially consists of, I'm exaggerating for effect, but it consists of do your best and hopefully it'll be okay. And the guidance that we want in our sector is very much more around what is the best minimum safe distance, why is that, and specifically we want guidance that we understand, and we want to engage with public health officials to make sure we understand that, and we want our workers, as you've said, to be fully aware of why that is. But in fact what we're facing is an attitude from government that, well, this sector just pretty much went, oh, well, we'll be okay. And why can't you do that as well? And the reasons for that are moral, ethical, and to do with the whole way in which, you know, our sector considers that their relationship with the audience and their relationship with the workers.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting. And you know, we've, you know, as you talked about, we've been looking at this really from sort of at the intersection of two different standpoints. The first is, you know, not to be sanctimonious about this, but a sense of responsibility to patrons and to venue workers and to musicians, and make sure they're not being put into, you know, dangerous situations, which again, I don't, this is not meant to be a political program, but, you know, our paradigm is being imploded tomorrow, again, by putting 19,000 people in a basketball arena. Yep. So that, you know, you've got that piece around just, you know, sort of responsibility. Then you've got the other part of the Venn diagram, which is just the core economics of what is it going to take to get customers to feel comfortable to put money back into the ecosystem and come in. I know you've engaged in a pretty significant survey of music patrons that you'll be releasing next week. Could you speak a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of audience attitudes and coming back?
Yeah, just under 30,000 regular gig goers took part in a 1 week survey that we ran that concluded yesterday. We're still deep diving into lots of information that they gave us, but the headline stats are, and I think it's, sorry, I better just have we kind of have a similar situation with the virus prevalence in the UK. We're significantly worse than the rest of Europe. We don't have the kind of outbreak of behavior on a mass level that you're seeing. You know, we don't have anything as significant as a slightly misplaced 19,000 seater stadium event, but we do have quite a lot of infection rates. So I would guess that our audience survey, in terms of the kind of people that come to our venues, which are probably, again, fairly similar, and the way that they think about these things is going to be more closely aligned than perhaps it would be in the rest of Europe. The headline figure is that 25% of our audience do not believe they should be attending a grassroots music venue in July. Another 30% are reluctant to do so, and broadly speaking, are not going to be willing to go more than once or twice. The numbers that are really prepared to go back and consider it to be back to normal are relatively small, around about 20%. Yeah. The next headline figure is the I don't know what's your guides on the social distancing?
6 feet.
What are you working on? What distance are you working on?
Around 6 feet.
6 feet. So that's roughly the same as us. We've got 2 meters, which is 6'6". Yeah. Okay, so it doesn't seem to make a lot of difference to them whether it is 6 feet or whether it's 3 feet. That isn't what they're concerned about. It appears that what they're concerned about is that the presence of a social distancing parameter indicates that it's not yet safe. Right. That's what they really think. When we ask them over time, I can tell you that by October, the number that are unwilling to go is down to 5%. And in fact, the number that plan on going more than they've ever been before had risen to 24%. Mm-hmm. So people are really keen. I can also say that 86% of our respondents said they were extremely keen to return to live music, but not yet. Another big thing from the survey is the willingness to engage with virtual events, which is nowhere near the numbers that we would need to see. 53% say they would not be prepared to buy a ticket to go to a virtual event. And then we're seeing reactions to some of the other alternative type of things we've done. We've just seen an announcement in the UK today about drive-in gigs, which I think you've already had some of. And again, the numbers that are willing to engage with that are very low. Not significant at all. I mean, thankfully, where we are, the numbers that can attend a driving gig are also very low, so perhaps that matches up. But yes, that's overall the survey reveals to us that people they're very keen to go back, but they want to wait. They don't believe the virus is under control yet, and they're not convinced by changing the things that a venue might do will necessarily increase the level of safety. At the moment, they want to wait.
Yeah.
Us saying that we'll go to, what about if it was 1 meter, doesn't really change the numbers very much. Saying that we're going to use plastic screens or perspex screens around bars doesn't change the numbers very much. There isn't much that venues are being told in the UK they can do that will increase audience confidence. Audience confidence is increased by allowing the prevalence of the virus to decrease over time.
Yeah. And another piece that you've been able to do, and that's interesting that you have, I mean, it sort of makes sense that you have such high numbers in that survey of people who are excited to go back, because again, this is sort of a self-selected going to your core audiences. And it's, you know, so I think heartening and encouraging to see people really feeling that ownership and they want to support the team. You've also had a lot of success collectively, not you, literally you, but collectively in terms of activating fundraising drives and philanthropic support. And I know you've been doing, there's a lot of activities this week in Scotland, is that correct?
Yeah, we have, well, Bev is sat behind me and I think is currently just trying to launch Save Our Venues Scotland.
Yeah.
Because she's just checking that everybody's got their tickets. And yeah, we have a very big lineup that's running this evening featuring Katie Tunstall, Hue and Cry, Wet, 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 some real like iconic names from Scottish music. And then lots of new and rising talent. It's a very diverse lineup, which we're very pleased about. But I will, you know, honestly say that compared to the size of the artists, ticket take up is relatively low. We're very pleased with the product. We're extremely pleased with the coverage. Yeah, so I mean, you know, it's not huge numbers. You know, once we have very good philanthropic stuff. I mean, we're over £2 million raised now from the public and from music industries and from high net worth individuals in the music industry. So we're nearly approaching £2.2 million that we've raised, and that's very helpful. But we're about to pivot is the interesting point, I think, for the call today. We are about to pivot with a very specific ask in terms of what we need the government to do. And that ask is based on our audience survey and based on a deep dive that we've done into the numbers for venues. I don't want to do too much preaching and speechy, but basically when you look at the health guidelines, and we've spent 8 weeks in meetings with government, what has become increasingly clear to us, and I think to our audiences as well, is that how they're trying to manage this in the UK isn't actually very safe. You know, that's the truth of it. The advice we have from Public Health England, our national body, is that singing is a high-risk activity. Dancing is a high-risk activity. Standing close to people is a high-risk activity, and being in a confined space is a high-risk activity. I don't actually know what else live music audiences do other than those 4 things. That's literally described the behavior of live music audiences. And I think in our case, I think the audiences are actually ahead of government on this. Government are wondering how can they escape their economic responsibility to not see this entire sector closed down. The audiences are thinking, how can I not get infected?
Yeah, no, that is so well put, Mark, and we so appreciate the work that you and Beverly and the whole team do. And again, I know it's not just you guys; it's a whole community that have been leading this effort for many years. Just in terms of the whole nomenclature around grassroots venues and what they mean and how we support them, and you know, such an inspiration to all of us here in North America, and certainly to our work here at a Music Policy Forum. I think to build off of what you're saying, you know, and again, you know, I try not to, we try not to be political. We try not to just, you know, kind of be a broken record on this stuff. But part of what we're going to be actually transitioning to in the conversation with how we've developed the REVS program in the United States is that we have our 11 pilot cities that all have extraordinarily different experiences in terms of what's happening with public health, with state leadership, with local leadership, and trying to sort of navigate how people are dealing with different sort of, dynamics. The state of Nebraska, the governor's state of Nebraska, yesterday announced that if businesses that mandate people wearing masks will not be eligible for state funding, through the CARES Act, so like they're saying you may not mandate masks, and then you've got other states that are handling this very differently. And so it really is unprecedented times on all fronts. But I think the, commitment again, that we all try to have again to understanding that again, we are not looking at this in terms of an, sort of late stage capitalist, how do we get the money back in the door? It's that this truly is a community, and these truly are, we're all the same in this, and we're all fighting for this together. And the balance of recognizing the science and the health side, and then being able to sort of address the the very significant realities of the economic side as well, is really an important lesson for us in the state. So I'm going to let you enjoy your Friday night. Thank you again to you and to Beverly. And I want Beverly to be our guest one time because we only see you in the back and I never. Thank you so much. And now let's pivot to our team in Cleveland. So Megan and Leaundra, are you with us still? There you go. Hey, Megan. Hey, Leaundra.
Hey. Hey.
Awesome. So as we said, the flow of today's program is we're starting big picture, sort of at a national level, and then kind of going down to the pilot level. And, I'd like to start actually, Megan and Leaundra, with the question that we ask a lot of our guests, which is just for context, just how are your people? Tell us a little bit about Arts Cleveland, and what was your 2020 going to look like before we got into the mess? What are the things that what's your mission? What were you doing as it relates to arts and music and the cultural ecosystems in Cleveland?
Yeah, happy to answer that. First of all, thanks for inviting us to be on. Thanks for inviting us to be a partner. Actually, although I think I pushed my way into the Revs project on behalf of the people that we serve. So delighted to be here. So our mission, first of all, we're a nonprofit 501c3 organization serving Cleveland and Cuyahoga County. So that's about 1.2 million residents in Northeast Ohio. Our mission is to advance the arts and culture community and in that area. And we've primarily served three roles. One is an advocate for arts and culture, including individual artists and increasingly for-profit creative businesses, as well as arts and culture nonprofits. Serving as an ambassador, so that kind of the translator between the arts side and other industries, everything from healthcare, neighborhood revitalization, economic development, so forth. And then as ally and service provider directly to people who are working in our industry. So that's where we've kind of been. And going into COVID, we were really sort of at this moment of transformation organizationally. We had been doing this work for 22 years, our earlier history in cultural planning and stabilizing the arts and cultural community through investment and beginning to think about creative intersections. And then I took over about 2 years ago, and then there was another leadership transition in our peer organization, the public funder, as well. And so it was kind of a moment for us with those two transitions to say, where do we want to go in our partnership and how we're serving the community? And so we were some of our longstanding programs had come to an end. We still had the capabilities, but we're trying to figure out what and who we were going to be. And so in some ways, that moment actually allowed us to pivot pretty significantly and pretty quickly to be able to help the arts community in Cleveland. And, we were leveraging those skills, case making, advocacy, research, convening, all those things that we had built over our 20-year history were like, bam, now is the moment that we need to exercise that and move it. And that's actually what brought us involved with the live music clubs, because we had that history. We'd done some stuff with them around an admissions tax years ago in 2012, some studies that we'd done on the impact of music in Cleveland. And so because that connection existed and because we'd actually brought on a board member who owns a live music venue, he came to us and said, hey, this thing is going down and we need to do something. And I said, can I jump on that call? And then 3 months later, we have 3 months of calls with live music venues. We're involved with NIVA, and now we're involved with Revs. And so I think that's one of the things that is really useful is that because of all of those connections and skills and capabilities, we were able to pivot, we were able to connect, convene that group, and then use all of the other connections that we have to be helping to make the case and and so forth. So it's been a really interesting 3 months. It's been really exhausting 3 months for us organizationally, but I think also feels very empowering to be able to I've gotten lots of letters from folks saying, I'm so glad we have an organization like this right now that could just immediately pick this up. If we didn't have that infrastructure, where would we be, and what would be happening?
And I do want to hold up, I think it's an important point, and usually in the show, I mean, obviously this is a show about music and music ecosystems and structures, and I do want to hold up, I think, an important point, which is an organization like Arts Cleveland that is completely cross-discipline. You know, I think that is working in dance and in theater and, you know, visual arts and all, you know, just all other aspects of arts. And, you know, certainly we've seen what's happened, you know, with the documentary film community this year and the loss of festivals. I mean, it just must be really a different level of exhaustion. So again, we're not like fighting some sort of exhaustion battle to see who can be more exhausted and overwhelmed. But I know that just looking at the totality of this and also the ability, though, to look at it as a connected ecosystem, and that music does not live in a vacuum, that these are all interdependent sort of systems that we're building and working in. And I know that the Creative Compass is a part of that. Alex is going to put that link into the chat just so people can take a look at that, but just sort of, again, helping people understand all just the different resources and where policy and philanthropy and sponsorship and all audience engagement, all those different pieces kind of fit together. It's really,
yeah. And I think it's just one thing to really note is that, you know, if I take it down to the level of the artist as being like a core part of who it is and all of the people that they impact, these structures that we've built around them. I mean, many people that we serve are serving, they're working at a nonprofit, they're a teaching artist, they might be a musician that's also gigging. Like there's so many ways in which all of this connects that I think these false connections these separations that we have, you know, when it comes down to the creative workforce or the creative worker, you know, they're working across all of these different structures. And so it behooves us as a service sector to really recognize and support that. And, you know, try to eliminate what are those barriers that are keeping those arbitrary barriers that we sort of set up, because there is a lot of, you know, between a theater venue who's facing the same issues as a live music venue who's facing the same issues as, you know, it's so, you know, it's being able to have those conversations in those different contexts and then weave what we're hearing from one to the other, and then everybody's supporting each other. So I think it's, that stuff's really important. On the public health side in Ohio, I just want to, Mark was saying quite a number of things that really, I think, resonated to me. The political divide that exists right now is definitely existing around this. You know, we've got 5,000 cases right now in Cuyahoga County, 43,000 cases in the state of Ohio. It felt like we were plateauing at a certain point, and now in the last couple of days, it's like ticking upwards. And so we don't know. And so you have that as the backdrop. But then you also have this, some tension at the state level between political, like even within one party, which controls like everything, they are between the like bodies in the legislature having different perspectives, and the difference between the governor and the legislature and different perspectives. Our public health director, who came out really, really strong and very supportive, was facing a lot of challenges, and she got, you know, she ultimately decided to resign. I mean, she had threats, you know, death threats that she was facing, and I think it's probably not been as significant as maybe what might have been because of the active steps that she took early on. And so there's that's sort of sitting there. And then there's all this discussion right now too around racial injustice that we're having, and the sea change in terms of people's thinking around that. And so you've got this arts sector where there are historical inequities in the setup. Like the reality is, so you've got a sector that's fighting for survival in many ways, or the experience side of arts and culture, against also the stark reality that people of color are underrepresented in that system. And I think that, so you've got all of those layers of things that we're all dealing with at once. And so it's a lot to manage. I think that folks that we serve are, you know, some of them have really pivoted successfully to do some really creative new things. Others are just using it as an opportunity to mobilize and connect and say it's time for something different. And, you know, still others are really worried. You know, the performing arts organizations really, really worried about how long they can endure this and whether or not they survive. And for us, those performing arts organizations are really core to our identity, at both live music venues up onto Playhouse Square. And I think that, you know, that's something that we're really facing. So the mood is interesting right now, a lot to be able to manage. But I think financial support is going to be really critical to helping these folks be able to make it through.
Well, and I think I want to bring Leaundra into the conversation and talk a little bit specifically about how the Revs sort of model has been rolling out in Cleveland. But just to build on that, Megan, I think, you know, the work that a lot of us are doing, and a lot of people who are participating in today's meeting are doing is, you know, it's tricky because we're having to both, you know, be engaged on a daily basis on what do we have control over and what are the immediate needs. So again, Revs is intended to be a very sort of incremental response to a very specific need. And then we also need to be engaging in the broader conversations about better structures and access to capital and how do we do this better across the board. And that's, again, why our organization exists. I mean, we didn't, you know, come together 2 weeks ago because we're like, hey, there's some problems here. I mean, you know, there are very, very important, you know, fundamental structural problems in the live entertainment industry. You know, is you know, we're sort of seeing the, you know, the impact of, you know, 25 years of lack of antitrust enforcement and mass consolidation, and again, access to capital and lack of public support and all the other things that are happening, you know, help exacerbate the vulnerability of our cultural structures. And so we have to be able to do both, which is hard because, again, there's never a 5-point plan and just say, do this and music is fixed or culture is fixed. I mean, it's a very organic, ongoing, changing thing. But Leaundra, we've enjoyed having you in the Revs program, and love for you to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the work you do with Arts Cleveland, and also, you know, your participation as someone who is a musician and is a practitioner as well.
Yeah, sure. My name is Leaundra Richardson, and I am the Associate of Programs and Marketing at Arts Cleveland, and I've been at Arts Cleveland for about 6.5 years, and I do a lot of the marketing, sending out different email blasts and social media work, and posting on our websites and that kind of thing, and also event planning. And yeah, it's just been really great to be involved in this Revs program because it is a music thing and I don't get the opportunity to get involved in music stuff at work as much. And so this has been really great. And
so one of the things that I'd love for you to speak to, and so again, we have 11 pilot cities. This is not a prescriptive model, right? So we have a national leadership team that is not telling people what to do, but we're trying to learn from the pilots to see, oh, that's interesting. So-and-so is doing that. So-and-so is doing that. Are you all connecting? So we're trying to sort of facilitate a cohort model. And it's complicated and tricky because everybody's making this up as we go. And it's, you know, all the challenges that you have in a model like this. But one of the things that you all have been doing, which is really interesting, is so like all of our pilots have sort of self-organized working groups. Yeah, and yours tends to be about 10 people, give or take, representing different aspects of the music community in Cleveland. So you've been subdividing sort of the issues that need to be worked through in a Revs conversation into very specific conversations that then you're having targeted conversations around each Monday. Could you speak a little bit about what that experience has been like and what that's been kind of as a process, from a process standpoint?
yeah, absolutely. So in Cleveland, we've had about 3 meetings so far, and we meet Mondays at noon. And as you said, we've had a consistent group right around, I'd say, 8 people on each call. And the group includes participants from a number of different local music venues, including bars and clubs that serve food and have live music. And then also a couple live music venues that have a theater kind of set up. And so each venue has specific needs in the midst of the pandemic. And we structured the meeting in a way to allow us to look at different themes each week. Mm-hmm. And during our first meeting, Megan kind of had each person go around and talk about what they were dealing with when thinking about reopening their venues and the issues and problems that they were facing in that. And their responses were very helpful to us. And we were able to take note of some of the themes that popped up in that discussion. And so then I ended up putting together a list of just some of the themes that had popped up. And every week every weekly meeting, we're focusing on a different theme. So some of the themes that popped up included things like musician safety, audience safety, employee safety, and also things like monetizing live streaming, communicating with agents and managers for musicians, and that kind of coordination involved there. And then also reopening in an economically viable way while remaining safe, because that's a really big problem a lot of the venues are facing right now. And during the second meeting, we looked at musician safety. And as I said before, each week we're tackling a different theme. And so Megan typically just kind of asks a couple questions around the theme, and each person responds with what they're dealing with on that specific issue. And the conversation flows really well because these venues are dealing with a lot in the midst of this pandemic, and socially distancing and all of that in the venues is very difficult. And also just trying to keep the musicians safe. And so some of the things that popped up in terms of musician safety were having detailed cleaning procedures for each show. And we've talked about kind of the best ways to clean microphones and thinking about those kinds of things, because, you know, microphones are right in your mouth, right in your face. And so just thinking about how to best sanitize those, and also thinking about how to sanitize a stage between bands during a multi-band show night, and how important that is to keep those musicians safe. And we also talked about the best way to socially distance band members on stage, and also how to sanitize green rooms and dressing rooms and things like that as well. And there are a lot of these things for these venues to think about. And over time, we'll be creating a number of different guidelines around some of these topics and kind of looking at that kind of thing in the process. And then I'll also add that this past Monday, we talked about audience safety, and the venues brought a lot to the table when we discussed that as well. And some of the things we talked about were just social distancing at a bar, when people are used to being able to walk up and get an order whenever they want, and how to work in that process. And we also talked about cashless purchases, and how maintaining social distancing and that with the audience members, keeping the attendees safe. And also just talked about finding resources for locations with fixed seating, because a lot of locations, when a person comes alone or when a person comes with their family members, how to best seat them in a venue with fixed seating and to allow for maximum attendance in a social distancing kind of way.
Yeah, that's so, you know, we really appreciate that so much, Leaundra. And part of what, again, has been fun as a cohort model, or interesting, not fun is probably overselling it, but it's been interesting. You know, yesterday you were able to share a lot of the notes that you've been taking in the Monday meetings with other pilot cities. And so they're able to benefit from the work that you're doing, and then vice versa, as they're developing their ideas and strategies, they're able to kind of inform your group. And hopefully, again, the point of Revs is less about the 11 pilot cities coming to some sort of resolution in terms of their community. Obviously, we want them all to reopen as safely and as quickly as possible and effectively as possible, but it's about making that information then widely available to any city, any stakeholder across the country or across Canada or across the globe, frankly, that can benefit from this information. And so, you know, again, we really appreciate the work that you're doing, that Megan's doing. I mean, Megan, just to bring you back in quickly, I know you're deeply networked with other arts agencies and other arts leaders. And, you know, one of the challenges is just how do we activate networks in terms of sharing information? And I don't know if you have any thoughts or insights in terms of, you know, as this starts to get more concrete and real, we're getting a lot of questions internally about, like, when are you publishing, when are you publishing? And, you know, part of what we are really trying to turn our attention to is, okay, what becomes a timeline and the platform and the networks that can be activated to make these materials accessible, not in a way that, not to be disrespectful to a lot of really good work that's happening by a lot of organizations, but not like, here's a PDF, you know, with a list of stuff to do, but more like, here's a living sort of example of how you can really plug and play and engage in this work. And so why don't we close this segment, Megan, just thinking a little bit about the broader sort of, you know, arts leadership ecosystem and how to kind of activate those networks.
I think it's, I view our role as a service organization. I mean, we're a nonprofit, we're not in government, right? And I know I have a lot of friends and peers who are in government around the country, and it has on the one hand, it has a lot of advantages, because when you're inside that structure, you can build the connections that you need to build between departments. Outside, as an advocate, we have to work really hard to be able to get an interface and have those conversations. So they're different things. I think that, you know, for us, we have a lot of flexibility, and I see us as like a network of networks. You know, if there's not, I mean, creating a master network one network to rule them all, doesn't necessarily work. And it's our job to be connected to every single network we possibly can. So whether it's art galleries or whether it's live music venues or whether it's, crews. And that's something I just want to put out there for everyone. We talk about venues and we're talking about musicians, but there are crews that are really, really struggling and they don't have anywhere to go. And we had a whole conversation about that this week in another club call. And it was like, what are we doing to make sure that those guys and those gals that are doing the good work on a regular basis, who all of their work is dried up, that they're cared for and supported. And in that whole conversation, it became like, oh, here's another thing that we need to add to the mix in terms of our conversation, like what's crew safety look like, And so I think that that's a key piece of the puzzle, seeing yourself as a network of networks, being connected to those folks and us being connected to like Ohio Citizens for the Arts. I serve on that board, which means as we're doing stuff at the state level, I'm weaving information back and forth, and as a part of the structure. So I think being a connector is probably one of the most significant roles that an organization like ours play. And, organizations like ours have a hard time, right? We're intermediaries, people don't like, where's the value of that? We want to just fund this directly. But I have to say that like in moments like this, these are the times when all of that relationship building, all of that connections really come together, because when you need to mobilize, you can mobilize quickly and you can move and you can act. So it's just a plug just nationally for folks like us who are doing this work as intermediaries, how important they are and how they need to be supported. But just generally what our role is making sure that we're connected to every maker that's out there and every network of makers that are out there so that we can achieve real and lasting change. And I think it's been an exciting time. And that's where I said, this is how this happened, right? It was us that got connected to you through NIVA. Right. And it was us that was connected to the clubs that connected us to NIVA. And that's what will make us powerful, I think, as a sector, as an industry. So thanks again for having us.
Thank you, Megan, and thanks, Leaundra. And now we're going to pivot. I'm going to bring in Kate Becker and Dani Grant. And we are now going to talk about what are the mechanics of actually putting on a live concert legally, safely, hopefully. In this moment. Kate, can you say hi?
Yes, hello everyone. Happy to be here. And this is really a great moment because Dani runs one of the coolest venues I have ever seen. And I have not had the pleasure of going to visit it in person, but she opened last weekend and she's got people coming back to her venue. So I'm just going to pass it to you, Dani, and you can take it from there.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, and I mean, it was an exciting weekend last weekend. I can tell you that the sense of euphoria around creating a production with the team, with the servers, with the crew, the artist, everybody, it was pretty impactful to see how much we missed it, how much we needed it. I think I can screen share here. Alex, can I? I have some pictures for you to show of the event and some context about the venue itself. So I will, everybody see? I'm going to go back one. So the venue itself is pretty far out there in the mountains. So the community that it's in is in a national forest, and we're about 30 minutes from downtown Fort Collins. So it's quite a trip to get up the hill to come see a show at Mishawaka. And generally in the season, we use shuttle buses and all sorts of things to bring people up there. It's a place that has 60 parking spaces, but 1,000 person capacity in the regular season. And it was built in 1916, and that is still the same building that we use for our restaurant and the indoor venue. This picture's from about 1925, I think, of the space. This is a picture of it with no one in the venue. You can kind of see this is with our full deck where we have our restaurant, and out beyond that is our venue space. You can see the stage back to the right. And then here's an example of kind of like what the shows are in 2019. So it's an incredibly intimate outdoor venue with a lot of good viewing space. You can see there's a lot of people that get crammed up in there. The river runs right behind the stage. This is another shot of the crowd. Here they are. this is a shot of an artist who has oftentimes at Mishawaka, artists get overwhelmed and jump into the crowd and hang out. And this is a picture of that. And as we got into 2020, when we were trying to create the new show, we spent a lot of time working on the plans. We really kind of fretted about this. We worked with our county to try and figure out what the right things to have in place would be to keep everything safe. And when we came out, we had the Beeves were the first show that we had. And Margot Sease here, you can see her on mandolin, is going to be talking more about her experience with this. But the Beeves came out, and I would say that that this is the first ticketed show for a performance in Colorado. It's a pretty significant moment. This is Ian from the band. And this is a band that, this is a rowdy crowd. The last time I saw the Beeves perform in Fort Collins, there were kids smashed up at the front and, really enjoying this set, and their social distancing did not exist at that show. That's a great shot. They are. And then this is Ian jumping down into the crowd, right? Like he's ready to go. He's jumping into the crowd. And then here's the crowd. This is what the yard looked like for the show. And, it was a different experience altogether. Here's later on in the evening when the next band came on, My Dog Ate Chad, and, people are kind of moving around. You can see in the bottom right of this photo, we do have people standing, but there's not a dance floor and there's not a section for that. Here they are, spending some time together, and this group came together. And that's kind of how we played it out, is that groups together could be together. This is how we configured the yard from a ticketing standpoint. And we learned a lot, because when we put the ticket sales on the web, we had about 1,600 people click through the platform to look into purchasing tickets, 1,600 people. From that, we had 489 people get all the way through the shopping cart. And then we only had 11 purchases. And these are tables of 8. So 11 purchases of tables of 8. So if you think about that, what were the barriers to purchase, and what were the issues? And we think what we've determined, and here we were, day of show, scrambling around, like kind of figuring out how to reconfigure the yard. But what we figured out, and I actually did this cut and paste like day of show with like ripping off things and Scotch tape and all of that. It was that we needed to provide smaller tables, but still socially distanced and keep our capacity, 8 people in the yard. And so we've done this going forward. So we've learned a lot. We're learning just a ton, every moment that we go through this. And everybody's, having these moments of like, oh, I think I've got it. And then a new piece of information comes in and then you have to change again. And I even think about if in the next, will we be comfortable doing that? Will we have an artist that can draw that kind of crowd available to us within the area? Will our staff want to work that? So there's so many questions coming up. So right now we have that last configuration we feel really good about, and we've learned a ton, and I'll let you ask some more questions now, but.
Absolutely amazing. Congratulations. And you have a full slate of shows and films scheduled for the rest of the summer.
We do. We're filling shows actually, all the time. Our next show that we put out is a band called 10th Mountain Division and Drunken Hearts, and we sold out that new configuration within a couple hours, and my coworker just texted me that said in 45 minutes we sold 14 tables with the new configuration. So like Mark Davyd said, people are very keen to come out and see shows. We just have to learn and figure out how to do it safely.
So I'm so curious, you went to public health early on, right? Figure this out? Is that correct?
I did.
And so did they come to your first show, Dani?
They did not show up. In fact, in Larimer County, they've really kind of put the onus on customers to police what's going on in different areas and locations and venues, which is really unnerving. Like, you thought you were worried about a 1-star before. Like, now, like, if someone's not happy with what you do, like you wonder if there's going to be a threat to your operations. It's very unnerving. But we did. My husband and I were fortunate enough to be asked to help work on the rules of the variance with the county on the front end of them asking for the state of Colorado to provide a little bit of an expanded opportunity based on the health situation in Larimer County. So we were really aware of the guidelines. And then from there, before we did the show, now it was kind of tricky. I did it the week before the show. I didn't tell my staff this, but I hadn't gone to the county yet. We already were on sale. I was pretty confident everything was going to be okay, but I was able to get together with the people who were working through it, and they were really excited about what we were doing. So that felt great. They were pleased with the way things were set up. And I felt like we did everything that we were able to do within the huge bucket of suggestions that are coming through from the guides, right? So there are 50 things that we can do. We selected things that we knew we could do well, that we thought would be as safe as possible, got that approved by Larimer County, and then, went ahead and did the show.
So are people coming from all over the country to figure out how you're back open?
I had a call from Knoxville, Tennessee yesterday with someone asking me to help them understand how we got started. And just a lot of interest, a lot of concern and how do I want to put it? Agents and managers are skeptical of the setup. Number one, it's not super lucrative. No one's making a ton of money on this. The artists aren't making a ton. The agents, of course, aren't. We aren't. But just skeptical of well, how did it go over? Did people buy tickets? And, and what did it look like? And so Will is actually here, and so is Margot from the Beeves. And Will could probably talk more about how they have been advancing with bands and how they've been, communicating with the industry in terms of all that skepticism.
Yeah, thanks, Dani. It's certainly been a challenge. I mean, any good advance has over-communication, and in today's current environment, you just have to really outline the structures that we have in place. So kind of like Liana said earlier, talking about how we're cleaning things on stage and what is the procedures in the green room. And so working through kind of our policies, what we currently had previous for a typical show, and just kind of ramping that up in regards to how are we making the artists feel the most safe in this environment, and a clear expectation in the advance of what are you walking into. Limiting access for staff in the green room was a big thing. We have a shared production office, so certainly a lot to think through, and I think the first one went pretty well.
Congratulations. Margot, I'm curious, how was it for you performing, in the new arrangement? You're still on mute.
Shoot. Hello. So first off, it was a real privilege to actually be able to play, and especially being the first band to play on the stage after this new arrangement, and just to kind of recognize that we may have been one of the only bands performing in the entire state as we walked out onto the stage and kind of sat there in itself was kind of religious, and also just looking at how unbelievably ridiculous all of it was to actually get it together, and to recognize how hard it was for everybody to get it together. And as Will was saying, in the advance in itself, as we were advancing the show, we were initially only supposed to play with me, the guitar slash bassist, and then the other guitar player. We were just supposed to do an acoustic set to kind of keep the capacities down in the green room. But because it was one of the first shows, I kind of pushed, and I was like, I'd really like to have our drummer on this set because I don't know the next time we're going to be able to have a show. And so actually having to try to work that out with Will and then with Dani to actually make sure that we were maintaining the guidelines and maintaining the social distancing measures. And a lot of the problem was that the other band had a pretty large, they had a lot of members. And so I think they have 6 members maybe, and we had 3, and so the capacity, we were trying to keep it around 10, but people are coming in and out, crews coming in and out, so we kind of understood what was going on. But ultimately, it was a surreal experience overall, mostly in the actual performance realm of things, because it wasn't a traditional show where we are used to as Dani said, like the rowdiness of the crowd, because we are a harder band and people do like to move around. So it was a bit bizarre to see people sitting down while we were performing hard and like really putting ourselves out there, and to not have that kind of traditional reaction that we're used to. And then also just the safety aspect of everything too. And, you know, trying to invite fans to come and tell people what was going on and their apprehension about actually showing up because of all of the social distancing things, and some people being excited that we had a show, but like we're also giving us a little pushback, like, are you sure you should be having a show kind of thing during all of this? And it's like, well, you know, we don't know how all of this is going to look, but all we do know is that the tables will be distanced, and that's what this is going to look like. And so we didn't have a complete clear set of what this was going to look like until we walked in. And overall, I think it was, you know, extremely successful in the end. I sat in the venue for a long time and kind of soaked it all up at the end, because I realized it was like, gosh, we haven't had a show in over 3 months, and it really is our livelihood. We're used to playing, you know, once to twice a week, and then touring. We'd be touring a lot right now, and then festival lineups. I mean, and we're just stuck at home. We are just stuck at home, and we're a bit exhausted from all the live streams and the effort that it takes to actually put those forth, and to not get, you know, the monetization that I think Leaundra was talking about, and also just some of the effort that we're actually putting forth and the reaction that we get out of it. So overall, it was an amazing experience. And I know I just threw a lot out there, but that was pretty much where how I felt about everything.
That is great. That is great. We do have a couple of questions coming in from the audience that I would love to share with you. What did you find is the optimum size for sales is one of the questions.
It's really just like, how many people can we fit and have the distancing that we need, but we have to have ability to have people come as 2s and 4s. I mean, imagine trying to gather 8 of your friends. Like, what 8 friends of yours that are music fans that share the same music taste that also will sit with you at a table without a mask on? Like, that's a head scratcher in a way. And we just weren't thinking that. We were just thinking, let's just keep it to 8 because that's the rule. And, you know, and so we had to kind of like rethink, you know, we're having to rethink everything. So the optimum sales apparently is as many tables as you can fit in with as much diversity of seating that you can.
Great. Got it. There's another really good question here around your reduced capacity and whether it's financially viable, and whether you're losing more money being open than you would be if you had stayed closed.
That is a really good question, and I don't believe that the production is financially violent anyway. I spent a lot of time with people who have worked with us in the past to do sponsorships, so I could subsidize the production. So the cost of doing a show at Mishawaka is anywhere between $10,000 and $13,000 of expenses to run a show at the Mish. And if you have 1,000 people in your audience and a couple really great bands, you can probably start to do the math on that. But we do have sponsorships that are helping subsidize the production cost. And in terms of, you know, the Mishawaka has always been a place of community, and the people who work for us are super important. And so if we can try and get to break even on these shows so that we can provide artists with a platform to play, with gig workers an opportunity, and, you know, and Will, you could probably talk to this about how difficult it's been for all the crew and staff that we've had and why it's so important to try and create.
Yeah, it certainly has been a challenge for my traditional house crew members, and, you know, without consistent gigs happening. And so that is part of it. And we're extremely fortunate to be an outdoor venue, to have the ability to do tables, to have sponsors to help subsidize this. But, you know, the feedback from my crew has been, you know, we're so thankful to have the opportunity to work. And it was just kind of funny working through sound check, and we got a little bit behind schedule. I was just like, can we still do this? Let's get the rust off a little bit. So it was really great to see them out in the environment, and I can't wait to get, you know, the crew who wants to work and is willing to work within the parameters that we have kind of up there at the Mish this summer. So it was great to see them back on stage and doing their thing.
I would love have to ask you each from an owner, manager, production manager, and artist perspective, what your biggest singular concern is going forward.
Mine is staff. We've had 14 really loyal long-term staff members not return this season. And out of 50, employees in the summer season, 50 to 60 employees, that's a large percentage. And just, trying to maintain customer service, additional work that needs to be done for the sanitization process, with less staff has been a stress for me. That's my biggest concern is.
Yeah.
I think for me, Kate, my biggest concern is, as more people see that we're doing things, that we continue to learn new and innovative ways to do best practices. We did it one time, and I want to make sure that we continue to do it the best that we can. And also just, being very clear with artists that, yes, this is a great opportunity to play a show, but this is not like it was 4 months ago. There can't be this massive hanging out and party atmosphere like it has been in some cases. So just managing the expectations and being sure that I'm educating myself and my staff to the best practices that are out there and available.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's actually, it's kind of piggyback.
And Margot?
Yeah. And I think for me, it's kind of picking off of Will's point, and it's actually like the safety aspect of everything, and wanting to make sure that, there aren't big parties after the sets, or the crowd is really respectful of everything going on, and they're not kind of coming up to us after the sets and everything, so we're not exposing ourselves to a lot of different people. And also making sure that all the venues that we are playing in going forward are hyper vigilant with cleaning practices and microphone practices, and that it's not just one venue who's taking it seriously, it's everybody, and that these are really in place everywhere we go, so we feel safe when we get on stage. And I know and a lot of it is just the unknowns of what is to be, so.
And I would add to this, Margot, you and the Beeves, among other artists, are kind of meeting this situation halfway. You're not getting the same talent fees that you're accustomed to getting for these performances, and you're kind of doing that, going into this knowing that things aren't the same. And one of the things that concerns me a lot is ticket pricing and equitability for people to go see shows. And some of the artists that we work with, when we're looking at a number of tables, how much are you charging for a table? Are you charging $1,000 for a table? And if that's the case, how many of your fans can come in and see the show? And artists like the Beeves are consider that and think about that, and are meeting us halfway and reducing some of their talent fees, which I think is really going to be difficult. And, so is this financially viable for artists all the time, for the, management crew that they have with them? That's another big concern. And how do we keep music equitable for everyone? There's a risk that this could become a very elite thing, live music.
Right.
Yeah, and Dani and Kate, if I could jump in on that point, I think part of what's so helpful about what you're doing at the Mish is, as we start to get more tangible and sort of understand what this is going to look like and what that means in terms of the economics, then that brings in the public sector and people like Kate and her networks, people like Megan and the nonprofit networks, the work we referenced at the beginning of the program with NIVA trying to get congressional support, that there absolutely is going to be a significant economic burden here, not only in terms of the lower revenues that are going to be generated because of social distancing, but the additional costs related to sanitation equipment and cleaning crews and all the extra things are going to have to happen. So we are trying to be very clear in the Revs initiative that there's a very narrow piece of this that we're trying to solve, or not solve, but trying to address, which is, again, getting venues open as quickly and safely as possible while protecting our music workers and protecting our audiences. And as that gets clarified, and again, it's going to be different in every community, but then that other piece just has to be addressed in a sustained way. I'm sorry, Kate, I didn't mean to jump in on your segment.
Oh, no, I know we're at time, Michael. I'm wondering, are there any other salient questions down there? Did you see any others that we should be asking while we have this?
Well, I think the question has come in a couple different ways, and it's a great question. it's almost more of a rhetorical question for today's conversation, but it is how are people navigating the other elements of the music, of the entertainment industry? I think Mark talked to us a little bit. I mean, people who are just opening up and saying, all right, we're just going to go do this thing. And they're not really doing that with respect to public health or the safety of their patrons or their employees, but that certainly is out there. And so you've got this kind of dichotomy where you've got the Revs organizations, a lot of venues, creating a high bar in terms of how does this work and what needs to happen. And then other people are just like going and doing it. And how are, people like Dani or Kate, what are you seeing in King County, or even, not to put Megan and Leaundra back on the spot, but even in Ohio, like how are people navigating that sort of different approach? Because certainly that is a reality. People are going out, they are going out in situations that maybe are not as strenuous in terms of public health considerations as we'd like to see.
Well, I answered in the Q&A in relationship to that. As I said before, I think there's power in people being able to come together. And one of the most exciting things for me, to get connected with first the Cleveland Music Club Coalition, who had come together around common issues before, and then see how that group became very open with one another. I think it just does create a setup where there's a power to act together. And I think there is some peer pressure that can be applied when you've got a unified voice of venues saying, hey, this is where we think we really need to be headed. And there's definitely some of that. We've seen some folks open and some concerns about, attracting talent that would otherwise go to these other venues that are being safer. And it certainly has, does create some tension. But ultimately, we'll see how successful those efforts are likely to be. And what I've seen in Cleveland, and I'm so proud of, because we've got a Cleveland-Akron crowd that are both participating closely within it's a half an hour of each other, is that they really are there and they're supporting each other. And the more that we can do to build those ties between those venues, I think the stronger the music system is actually going to be, and even more broadly between everybody that's connected to that. I mean, just the whole discussion of crews that people were having, the whole discussion of musicians and audiences. I think that we're stronger together. We are.
Well, Megan, I think that's a great comment to wrap up on. So just huge thanks to all of our presenters and panelists today. So Dani, Kate, Leaundra, Megan, Margot, Will, Mark, David. Huge thanks, as always, to our producer, Alexander Dolden. Huge thanks to Anna Chalenza and the team at Georgetown University for being our technology partner. As always, as we say every Friday, we appreciate you spending time with us. We especially appreciate you spending part of your Juneteenth with us. If you have comments, questions, suggestions, always email us at musicpolicyforum@gmail.com. And with that, share the archive if you have friends and colleagues who you think would enjoy it. We appreciate your time. Thanks. Have a great rest of your Friday.